defined a problem as something you don't know how to do. If you know how to do it, it's just a practice or an exercise. If you don't know what to do with it, you're going to struggle with it a little bit to try to figure out what to do with it. And then it becomes a problem. Mm-hmm. So I like to think about, I think about that so often. And I think that struggle is attached to that. I don't know what to do. So what do I do to get started without somebody telling me what to do?
Mm-hmm. Sure. But I think the thing that we'd want to double down here is that struggle has many negative connotations to it. Right. And that this notion of productive struggle means that I'm doing something purposefully for an unclear challenge, so to speak, so that progress is made.
Yes, I like that.
Because there is another thing that occurs sometimes too, and that's unproductive results. So like, some things come easy, you get an answer. That doesn't necessarily mean that you learned anything, right? Mm-hmm. So the struggle actually is a process for learning.
Right. Yeah, building off of that, I think a lot about, this section talks about growth mindset too. And when I think about productive struggle, I think about, and what I talk to kids about too, is actually like building pathways in your brain. If it's easy, the pathway's already there. It's just passing on through. But when you're in productive struggle, you're building the pathway, the connections. And that's a process. And we talk about it with like comparing, like building a muscle. To build your muscle, it takes work, and like relating it to getting stronger, but using your brain.
Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking about what John just said about unproductive struggle. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a bit of a hint for a teacher to be able to recognize productive struggle versus unproductive struggle. And if we see kids on an unproductive pathway, how do we step in to help them make it more productive without, and there's always this, I want to help them, and we wind up telling them more than we should.
Yeah, so and even better, oops, sorry, Linda.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, but even to expand on that, you're exactly right. And what are the actions or the things that I can help them do to unstick themselves as well? So there comes a point for everyone where, okay, now some type of intervention is needed, I'm sure. But before we even get to that point, do students have an arsenal of ways to get unstuck and move forward through that struggle themselves, right?
I was reading a paper, piece of student work. It's an adult graduate student, and they were examining children's work, and this was a secondary teacher looking at kind of kindergarten, first grade work. And what struck me was that the teacher said, oh, he doesn't understand XYZ. And I thought, what an unproductive way to say it, because there's no path forward with that. There's no identification of what you guys were saying with a pathway forward. You don't know, if you say something like that, you're not acknowledging whether it's productive or an unproductive path, because you haven't acknowledged that there is a path. That's almost like a wall that's put down. They don't understand it. Well, they understand something because they're doing something. Mm-hmm. What is it?
Yeah, those are 2 points there. So I wanted to say the one word that I used in graduate school that I read, it's in the literature somewhere, you have to grapple with the mathematics. And I sort of like that
description. How does that translate to Spanish? Ooh.
Yeah.
Can you say that again, please?
Grapple. It's a way of wrestling,
I haven't heard that.
You know what wrestling is? Okay.
No.
It's almost MMA without the punching.
So anyone can try to translate that in Spanish?
Yeah, I'm trying it on Google Translate. Oh, it has fight, luchar. Lucha. The same thing. Yeah,
it's the same thing with the struggle.
Yes.
When I tried to find it was lucha, and I don't agree with that.
Yeah, that's right. It's not the right word. Yeah. Because
So grapple would be like struggle, but it seems to be less challenging. I'm grappling with this idea right now. I'm not struggling with it. I'm just sort of mulling it over. I'm thinking about it. I'm trying to make sense of it. It's a nice word.
Mm-hmm. So can you speak to something actually in your other piece in that right there, like your perception of the word, which comes down to this notion of struggle as well. And it's not actually in Principles to Actions, but it's come up in some later work. And that is the notion that students have identities that are predisposed to struggle or not, based on the experiences they've had. And teachers themselves have math identities that may compromise how struggle unfolds in the classroom because of the way they perceive math to be, or the way that math has to be done.
Mm-hmm.
So especially, you know, in a lot of American schools, what happens is kids struggle, teacher feels like she did a bad job or he did a bad job, right? So not seeing the value in that experience.
Right.
You know, it's interesting because I think about our time in the classrooms in El Paradon, and that's the most recent, or even in Nepal 2 years ago. And I think I would hope that we are all learning to move beyond that, but I think we do have these preconceived notions, whether they come from the directives on high or our own experience in doing mathematics, that it has to be done a certain way. Mm-hmm. And I brought this up because for our team in Guatemala and Ecuador, moving teachers beyond that notion that it has to be done a certain way, I think is the first step. Because when they believe that, their students believe that.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I agree.
Yeah.
Well, and yeah, that's a great point. And then you are also able to then build a community that supports struggle, and then a lot of other things can occur then too.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not, you don't perceive yourself to be a bad math student or incapable of learning math, because the community embraces struggle.
Right. So it is, productive struggle is not like an impossible task or something that's not accessible. And that's sort of what Kim was saying. There's something there, and how do you connect it? That's stuff, we want multiple entry points into a task. And so that's a requirement that I think is really valuable. What do you think, and this is a question I don't have an answer to, so someone's going to have to give me it. Do you think it's okay sometimes like, when is it okay for the teacher to give an answer? Say, okay, you're done struggling, I need to give this to you. Is it okay?
I think there's certain times when information does need to be provided, but it depends on what that information is. And, that's where that comes, I think, with experience and what have you. I mean, we always want to give students the opportunity first to make sense and make meaning themselves before we deliver something to them. But there's certain facts that they might need before they actually try to explore things. One thing I'm always leery of is that's the go-to move. Just put down your pencil, let me show you what to do. Mm-hmm. Then we're just creating replication of ideas, or I'm trying to replicate somebody else's math as opposed to owning it myself.
Mm-hmm. So can one of you guys on our team sort of tell me what John just said there? Because I think that fits with what I learned from Carol Malloy, but in your own words.
I mean, I think it fits in with like us not wanting to kind of like take the easy way out, which I think we've discussed in other conversations, right? Like as a teacher, you want to support your students, but you don't want to give them so much support that they become dependent on that and unable to like think through things themselves, right? And that like, yes, there is a time to give information, which also when we've talked about like the map and how do you get to the place that you're going, like if they're totally off base, how to get them like back headed in the right direction instead of like continuing this struggle in the incorrect direction where they're just getting further and further away. But again, without being the one that's doing all the thinking for them. And actually, I'm just going to like add on something that I thought about when we were discussing this at the beginning of the conversation, which is like about how to get unstuck. But I guess what also comes to mind for me is like how to get them unstuck, like from like with each other, right? Because I think it's like this piece of us not giving information, but often we see that there are students who are kind of headed where we want them to be, and sort of like emphasizing that and sharing, getting them to share where they're at helps a lot. And we see that a lot with the students in the classrooms and the workshops we're in, just like mixing them up so that they can like interact with other ideas and see how other students are thinking to get each other unstuck.
So being the queen of connections here among these effective learning practices, I think what Alex just mentioned really has such a direct connection to posing purposeful questions. So as we go back and think about how do we ask the right question, and we aren't always going to ask the right question, but at least we have to have our own productive struggle about what question do I need to ask right now. I think that's such a strong connection.
So Linda, you bring up a great, and Alex, you said so many things really well there. One thing that I don't think, especially American teachers, have been trained to do well is to plan for struggle. We've approached it as a reactionary activity. Like when kids struggle, I have to fix them or fix the situation. When the idea of productive struggle is I plan for something that's going to be challenging, so they have to work together, like Alex speaks to, or so that they have to work through it. And I might have to, like, so that map example is a good one, right? I might have to tell them, like, this is how the map has to be held this way or pointing in this direction. Yeah. Like those are some, basic facts you might need to know. But figuring out how to get there then is a new conversation that you can deliver or develop on your own. I guess my point is, you two together sparked that message to me, a reminder to me that many folks aren't trained to plan for struggle. We try to fix it once it happens.
I want to pick up with what John said, because the one thing I think about is a lot of times I find that teachers don't know where students might be going or where they might be coming from. If you're answer focused, which many people are, as you said, Chad, because that is part of the culture. If they're answer focused, they may not be focused on what could get to that answer, and they may not have ever paid attention to productive ways to get to an answer. And so when they think there's one way, it's very hard to run with what a child's saying and say, okay, I hear you. Let me listen. And if you've never heard that strategy before, it seems like it's the Wild West. You're out in the brambles and I'm sorry, that's too much metaphor for this group. You're out in the wild, in the wilderness, and you don't know where they're going because you've never followed that path before. So teacher's job is to know many, many, many paths, so that when you see a student going off, somebody used the words going the other way. Alex, I think you did. You have to know if that's ever going to be productive, because it might. And then you know what question to ask to kind of lead them back onto the path. That's where, John, just picking up.
Give yourself permission to say to kids, or feel confident in saying to kids, I'm not so sure about that. I need to think about your way. I never thought about it that way before. And give yourself permission, because kids are going to come up with some ways of doing things, some of which are on the right track that we've never thought about before, and some of which are not on the right track. And at least in my own experience, sometimes I just needed time to think about what was going on in that kid's head and not feeling that I had to react right away.
I love that. Well, I think a nuance to what Alex was saying too, with students supporting each other and struggling together, is we do need to be aware of the student who gets it right away and then tells others.
That's right.
So
that's exactly right.
It's easy to rely on that and go, well, I'm not going to do it, but John knows, have him tell the whole group, and then we're all set. That's still not a productive struggle.
But that does come back to this notion of a classroom community and understanding how one productively engages and supports in the community, and having kiddos create those norms together.
So there's something there, especially when we're talking about maybe 2-hour classes in Ecuador. What I've seen is that since they are not prepared to deal with the struggle, then when other student knows how to solve something or a problem, the way they think they can help others is just saying the answer. So sometimes like, can anyone know how to do this? And then know how to, for them, sometimes it's like, oh, I know, it's 17. So they have to start thinking what to do with this and how they can help others. So that's really powerful. So how to help someone else without saying the answer, but helping them actually to see how your thoughts were, like thinking out loud.
And it circles back to Linda's point about questioning, right? What questions do I ask as a teacher to help kiddos get unstuck? But at the same time, what questions do I ask metacognitively or to myself to get unstuck? Or do I ask another person or another partner or colleague or peer for that matter? So yeah, just telling isn't the idea here, right?
I think I connect it back to the principle about having your objectives in mind and thinking, what is it that my students should be struggling with today too? And like, for example, if I'm working on a task that includes division and to a really who would spend the bulk of their time and get lost on figuring out a multiplication fact that they might need to be a part of that. Like maybe they would have a multiplication table, and that is something like I don't want them to be struggling on what is 6 times 7 when they're trying to make sense of something else and then get lost in the whole thing. And so I also need to decide like what should the struggle be, and also know my students to know like, okay, what tools will we need so that the struggle is productive in the area where we're focusing right now. And then I have to know too, okay, there's other moments that we're going to keep working on our fluency with our facts. If they're still in a space of not making sense of multiplication, but like learning what the facts are, I don't want them to be spending all of their time figuring that out instead of paying attention to or having the brain space for the task at hand.
So that is really, really, really well said. And it's something to keep in mind too. And that is tools carry stigmas with them in math. And that there's certain tools that we want to make accessible to kiddos because they might need that. Like they can get through the struggle. They just might need a tool to lead it. Like you don't want them to struggle with what is 3 times 4. You want them to struggle with something more grand than that you've selected for that task or that goal, right? And so what tools am I going to make accessible to them so that they can have the right struggle? So that's a really, really great point, an important point. But again, it comes down to knowing my kiddos, knowing my students. It comes down to knowing the goals and the math, right? And anticipating where things might be problematic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and being transparent about it, right? I think this is the thing I learned with each of the principals is to let the kids know this is what you're doing today. You're struggling with this. To Paul's point, I think we have to shift the paradigm of what teaching looks like and what great teaching is. It isn't, and teachers are in this position because they want to care and help others. And so, you think, oh, I want them not to struggle. I want them to get this. I want to help. And we want to say a great teacher is someone who helps them struggle in a productive, meaningful way.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right. I wanted to, I lost it. Okay. It was brilliant. Sorry. It's gone forever.
It was going to change our life.
It was. It's not coming back though. So.
Well, let me ask the next question. One thing you guys, Kim and John, I hope you see what I love about these is we could spend almost the entire time talking about one question because everyone has such rich things. And I don't know how many times you guys take all my ideas of questions that I'm going to ask. So I'm sort of winging it in some ways, and which is good. It's good practice for me. But here's one. I used to say to my students, you should never leave class confused. I'm not sure if that's the correct answer, but how does that fit with productive struggle? Because I think I have to change what I want to say now about that. But how do you, because there's a point where it's enough, you're done struggling. You should understand the concept. That's what productive struggle is all about. So,
yeah, I don't know that confused is the word, but I think I understand what you're aiming for. I would say maybe, you shouldn't leave class angry.
Yeah.
Maybe like that. But sometimes a grand problem might take a couple of days to really wrap my head around. I might be confused. Actually, confusion is a good thing. Like it causes you to try different strategies and approaches to kind of figure out what's going on. I'm not sure that hopeless confusion is something I probably don't want.
Right. How many times have you ever heard anyone say, oh, I just have no idea, but who cares? I'll figure it out. Or I won't even figure it out. So I'll get the answers. That's what you don't want. Right.
That's right.
So maybe you don't want to leave the task confused as opposed to that. Yeah.
I think confused is a mindset as well, because I have sent kids home and said to them, I know you don't understand this yet. We are still working on it. This is what we know so far. This is what you said. And tomorrow we'll work on this.
Yep.
And if you don't phrase that way, I've had parents write me emails and say, oh, my son came home and he doesn't understand what you did in math class today. could you help him tomorrow? It's like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, I should have said something to the whole class to anticipate that and live in it.
Yep.
With some
Yep.
comfort.
That's something we have to do with teachers too when we're working with them, because since we're thinking on teachers that are maybe just starting to think different the way they've been used to teach, so they will be struggling with that. So they need to know that, like, it's okay, you don't have to do everything we're talking about. Maybe don't have to do everything the book says right now. It's okay to be confused. It's okay to feel like that, but let's start moving on. So that's something we have to work with teachers too, and say to teachers too.
Yeah, I would think about flipping it from confused to curious. Like if they're leaving feeling curious, then they can know there's still something that I don't know yet or that I don't understand yet, but I want to learn more.
Mm-hmm.
And curious, I mean, it's like really semantical, but like confused to me, I don't like to be confused, but I like to be curious. And so even just thinking about like positive and negative connotations that go along with those words.
Mm-hmm.
I love what you just said, because I think whoever said you have to understand something in a 45 or 1 hour period.
Yeah.
Right.
That's right. Well, that's a great point, Linda. Great point.
Time blocks, and we don't give kids permission to just say, as Kim said, just, I want you to think about this tonight. You might not have it all straightened out. We're going to continue to work on it. Who said I have to understand how to add fractions with like unlike denominators in 45 minutes? And yet we expect kids to do that.
Yeah.
And I think our pacing guides often, and I don't know what you have in the various countries that you work in, but I know that pacing guides here are very rigid in that respect.
Mm-hmm.
Or perceived to be.
Yes.
And in some places they are that rigid. Fair enough. And I think in other places we perceive them to be that rigid and don't take the time to do some things we really could do.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you see that I'm pet sitting my daughter's cats as she's preparing for her move across the country, and this one is particularly venturesome. So I'm going to move it into another room. And Kim, what you said leads to this next question too. I think, what are the conditions that need to be in place for productive struggle to really happen in the classroom? And you sort of alluded to what does a student have to understand? I think part of our job as teachers is to prepare students for that. So answer that question, and I'm going to put these guys in another room. I'll be right back.
All right. Do you want me to start? So actually, this comes out of my recent productive struggle book, and it's the 3 things that have to happen first. And the first and foremost is that we have to value struggle and embrace it. So, and that means understanding what it is. It means having an appetite for it. It means a lot of different things. But so if I don't value the challenge or value that experience, then, or I don't perceive that's what teaching and learning is, then it's never going to happen, period. So that's the first thing, I think. The second thing is knowing who I am, and more importantly, knowing my appetite for struggle, and then ultimately knowing my kiddos, who they are. And then the next part is like a community where all this comes together. I think those are the 3 big ideas that really have to be in place, or the plane, it's not going to work.
And I would just second that, John, by saying all stakeholders, because schools don't like to come in and ask students, what are you working on? And they say, I don't know, because at that point they don't know. So teachers need to have support from admin. In some respect, the admin understands that.
And not just that. So support from admin, I agree with you. Stakeholders, I think you said it well, right? We need families to understand that, there are going to be days when student comes home and, I'm not sure what happened today. I struggled. I didn't get a right answer. And that's okay, right? Because we're building towards something greater. And that, those conversations also shape the value and the identities of struggle.
Yep. Yeah. Well, dang it, you guys took my great revelation, which was to say parents need to also be part of it, or families. So thank you. What about the classroom environment? What about it needs to support productive struggle?
Well, I think that does speak to that community, right? But there's a couple parts to that, I think. So, I mean, I talk about this a lot. we often have rules in classrooms, like to raise your hand to do this, and different rules. But that's those are set by authority figures, no matter who writes them. A community of productive struggle norms is generated by those students together in terms of what it means to work well together, right? Not telling somebody the answer when they're struggling. Ideas of taking risks. I think there's some others. So I'd be interested to hear what other people think about, like, what does the community environment have to be like so that struggle thrives?
Yeah. What do you guys think? What do you think teachers people like Pau or Fatima or Kelly or anyone? Any ideas?
I think we have been talking a lot about this, like building safe spaces is clearly something we need here. So we can struggle, but feeling free to make mistakes and feeling free to express myself, that I'm not understanding something, and really know how to ask for help when I need it.
Perfect. Those are two very good ones. Anything else you would all add?
I think, it just goes into like the classroom culture and celebrating the struggle, celebrating the process, and not just, okay, you got this right, but talking about, specifically why working through something is admirable and worth celebrating, and really like helping those students feel proud in the classroom and having all of the class feel proud of those moments. And when, before they're used to this, many think like, oh, I got it right. I'm the first one. And that's what they have pride in. And so changing that to like celebrate together and being able to talk about like, this person, look at how this group is working through this and building their brains and learning something new, and that being something that everybody joins in together to celebrate.
You are right on the money. I want to come back to celebrating, because I think it's even more robust than celebration. I think it's reflection too, but I want to come back to it in just a second, because you're certainly on to something there. So celebration is one I heard. What it means to work together. I heard taking risks. I think that's a big one. I think part of that too means respecting other ideas. I think.
Perdón.
Oh yeah, go ahead, Fatima. Go ahead. We want to hear yours.
Creo que lo que dice Cali es muy bueno, ¿verdad? Porque incluso de la persona que hasta cierto punto no participó tanto, no decía nada, al momento de que le celebramos más de algo que dijo, entra en duda a los demás. Les dice, si la señora le dijo a él que estaba bien o lo felicitó, eso quiere decir que lo que está diciendo está bien. Y es como empiezan a cuestionar mucho, y entre ellos se dan como más confianza, y el que menos participaba es el que ahora es como, vamos, voy a participar porque la señora me dijo que estaba bien o estaba mal, yo le doy mi punto de vista.
All right. Who's going to tell us
what? Okay. My internet cut out a little bit at the beginning, but I'll try to save what we can. So Fatima's talking about like how celebrating like the different contributions that the students are making, whether it's correct or not. It's like if the teacher is showing or sending this message that like whatever it is that you're contributing is valid and like that you should be doing it, then the students are going to see like that as something that's being rewarded and not just the right answer. And so in doing that, the students' response would be, well, I can contribute, and even if I'm wrong, like I'm going to keep participating because that's something that is valued in the classroom and in the discussion.
Changing the endpoint.
Yeah, and she also said something about encourage students that are not used to talk. So she said that too, like encourage. So the ones that are not used to talk, and once they try and you're celebrating this, then you will encourage them to talk a little bit more, or try it at least.
So can we stick with this idea of celebration for a second then? Because I want to go a little bit deeper with the notion. Celebrating effort, absolutely, right? But also celebrating the things that this community values as a productive thing. So at the end of class, celebrating that you kept trying when you didn't get it right away. You didn't get the right answer, but you kept working. Or I'm celebrating you because you worked collaboratively without telling somebody how to do things. And then part of celebration too is reflecting. So from time to time, having students at the end of class to think about like, what part of math was challenging today and what did I do to overcome that? Does that make sense? Like I don't know we spend enough time processing what happened in the class. It's always about processing the results and why we got them, not about, you struggled today, Chad, but I like how you asked 3 other people, and how did that help you move forward? Does that make sense?
I think the other thing that we also need to focus on, and I agree with what John said, but we've also been it's come up a lot in even our own conversation, and that is taking the focus off getting the right answer and putting the focus on the thinking that's going on.
That's right.
And I remember once we were playing a game, it was a great game. And I said, one of the kids got it wrong. And I looked at him and I said, that was a great mistake. And they all looked at me like I was crazy. And so who cares what the answer to a problem is? It's the thinking process that I'm really going to learn from, and not whether I get the answer right or not. And I think we all tend to fall back on the goal in mathematics is to get the right answer, but really it's not. It's about what kind of thinking am I developing? What kind of thought process? How am I learning to kind of, when I don't know what to do, kind of, again, back to that productive struggle, get myself back on the right track. And so I think we also need to celebrate, it goes right along with what John just said, take the focus off of getting the answer and put the focus on, what are you thinking?
I want to just share, you're right on the money as well, Linda. The one thing I know of teachers in my district and others that I work with, they don't spend time because they don't know how to, or they don't feel that they can help kids learn how to get unstuck. Like, everybody values it, I think, but nobody actually teaches these are the things you do when you're unsure what to do.
What are some of those, John?
What are some of those things? There's certain questions that we'd want students to ask themselves, such as, where have I seen a problem like this before? How else could I represent this? What have I tried? We also encourage the students to look, not to get an answer, but to look at what other people are doing. So pausing the process for the whole class and sharing out when everything's half-baked, just to spark different approaches. We ask other questions we want students to ask themselves, such as, what kind of tool would be useful right now? And why would that tool help me? So I think there's a collection or a host of those types of behaviors we want to teach students. We just, unfortunately, in our district, don't do a good job of that yet.
And we could take the numbers out of it as well.
Well, that's a good point. Yeah, right.
Some of these, and I need some more. How many will I have at the end? Just these basic there's number words, some, more, less.
That's right. Or we'll ask students, like, can you restate the problem? Or, I mean, I don't have a handy list with me, but I'm thinking about some of the ones that we've been working with our teachers, and then have been just that. Have you taught your student to do these things? Because we often complain, like, he doesn't know how to get unstuck. Right, because we never taught him.
Yeah. That's on you.
Yeah.
Well, and that'd be a great, so for our team, what a cool list to start to put together with your teachers. That would be something that they could share with each other, because it also reinforces this idea that it's not the right answer. It's about getting stuck. The other thing is, these are things mathematicians do, or engineers or whomever, when they get stuck. I mean, I know in statistics, we always taught us to look at extremes. Okay, I don't know what's happening when these two numbers are really close together, but what if I make the smaller number super small and the bigger number super big? Now what's the trend? Now I could talk about it as it gets closer to E. Or like with cognitive guided instruction, if you can't do 15 and 12, do 5 and 2. Find the pattern with that. So those are other strategies that I think about. But that'd be really a great activity for your teams to work on.
It would be. And then, so generating that list and then talking about how do we actually teach that with kids.
Yes.
Right? Like, so then practicing that too. That is a great idea. Agreed. In fact, I think you just developed my professional learning for August with some of my teachers. So thanks.
Nice. I love it. That's good. There's payment for the book.
Oh, wonderful.
For me to send her to send me her book too.
Perfect.
So, but can we follow up with this? Because this is a question I got a lot as a teacher. It's important as a mathematician to get the right answer, because if I'm crossing the bridge and you've gotten the wrong answer, it's going to collapse on me. So what happens, and what's your answer to that? You guys, Guatemala, people on our team first. What do you say? Because the right answer is, I think, part of the culture, right? In Guatemala and Ecuador, we're looking for the right answer in mathematics. It was in the U.S. too, frankly, it is. What do you say? Free anyone. I will start calling on people.
Well, I was thinking maybe in a statistical way, but sometimes in real life there's not a right answer, just an optimum or the best you can find. So sometimes it's not just trying to find the right answer. Math is an excellent tool to take a really informed decisions. So the answer maybe is just a decision you have to take, and math is the tool that makes you have more information and to collect data, so you can be or take a decision, even it's not right, but at least you have more information to decide. So when I'm thinking right or wrong, maybe I'm thinking just as right as a decision you're taking in taking a risk too, but it's better if you have more information than not having. So that's what I'm thinking when I'm thinking on right.
What do you think, Callie?
Yeah, I am thinking about the opportunity of including role models. And so, like, for example, using the example of engineering in a bridge, of course they have to be 100% certain that what they're constructing is going to be safe. And so, like, we in our Girl STEM Club, we made the spaghetti bridges, but used them as like the cable cars that are being developed in the city of Guayaquil right now, and the actual cables, and we tested and did all of these things. And so, but being able to have a role model who could come in and talk about the process and how, yes, at the end of this process, you need to be able to stand on what it is that you are producing or what it is that you arrive at, but it's not something that is done. People don't work through and figure out what the cables need to be like for this cable car that's going to carry people across the river in 5 minutes. That is work that takes a really long time. And so having those real life examples that can come in and speak to that, I think helps students as well be able to see how the classroom, when they're feeling that in the classroom, that's exactly what happens in the real world too.
Mm-hmm. Love it. Yeah. What do you guys think? Anyone else? Kim or John or someone, do you want to add to that?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think
for sure.
Well, I think keeping in mind that somebody builds a bridge has mastered, quote unquote, mathematics and is using it for a different purpose. But when you're learning math, right, you're learning how to do it. You obviously are going to make mistakes. That's part of developing the understanding, so that you do get right answers down the way. I always encounter the belief that a third grader should be right all the time. That's just not what it means to learn something.
Right.
So we agree that, if they build that bridge, I want it to be done well and correctly. But that's the end result of learning. Its application, right? That's not the initial soiree, so to speak.
Yes.
That made me think about an apprenticeship model. When you apprentice to someone, you do not apprentice as a master. That's by definition. You come in and you do small tasks, and you see how your small task fits in with the broader task. And gradually you move your way up. And in a sense, that's what we're doing. We just do it daily on a more of a accelerated process. I don't know that that's a good thing. Maybe all of our learning should be more contextualized. It feels more like an apprenticeship, because then your struggle seems like it's for a purpose.
Yes.
Rather than just because it's hard today, or we got lucky we had a good task. So having real tasks in there might help with that.
Yeah, what I'm getting from this is something that, because my answer was like, well, duh, it's school. You are learning. You should make mistakes. However, I really like what you guys are saying too, Callie and Powell. It is also, we're not going to ask the bridge builder. We're not going to say, we need a bridge across the river. See you in an hour on how to make it.
Right.
They're going to try it, and they're going to test models, and they're going to maybe build a physical model or do a sort of virtual model, and they're going to see it make mistakes, and then they're going to make adjustments for that mistake. So that's what mathematicians have. And that's because it's a real world problem. There's context in it. Yeah. What do you think about? So Kim, you're just totally leading us to each of these questions, because that's another question. What is, what's the role of context or student engagement in productive struggle? Because you can completely miss the kid and they're not at all interested.
Say that again, Chad.
So what's the role in student engagement or context in productive struggle? So, if you hate sports and I go, well, today we're going to do, or for the next month, we're going to do nothing but football examples and talk about math and football. There's probably going to be a lot less productive struggle because there's not meaningful, interesting.
Understand.
So what do you think about? Maybe not. I don't know. So what are your thoughts about that? How do we compensate?
Well, I think knowing the math deeply so we can apply to different topics so that students can see topics of interest regardless of the concept I'm teaching. I think that's part of it. I don't know. I need to think more about that. There is some, how do I want to put it, interest level necessary for the struggle to be worthwhile, or viewed that way by the struggler or the doer, right? For example, I know someone who talks about Tetris all the time, and it's a great struggle that you can't win.
Yes,
right?
Tetris.
But there's interest in it, right? I will struggle for hours playing a game because I'm interested in it. So I do think that does play some role within struggle.
Yeah. That's a great point, John. Thanks. You can't win at Tetris, period. It's just...
No, actually, it's Raj. He thinks about it or says it quite a bit. But yeah, you can't win Tetris, but it's a fun game to play.
Yeah.
And that's true for many other games as well.
That's right.
So then how do we wrap the math so that it's interesting like that all the time, regardless of context?
Thing that's coming to my mind is those the paradigm of the culturally relevant pedagogy, that you're really connecting to what is interesting to students. I've got a integer problem sitting around in my files. It has Sonic the Hedgehog on it. And that's not going to be something I bring out, but that activity is always rehashed because the kids are interested in something else, some other character at the time. It might be Pikachu one year, and then it might be, it doesn't matter. That's not cultural, but it is sort of a minor connection point. It is cultural, but whatever it is that's interesting them is what you want to try. If you're going to gather data, a couple years ago, I would have flipped water bottles because they were all doing that. But what am I going to do this year? I don't know. There's no classroom, so I don't know what I would do this year.
Right. That changes everything when you have the virtual classroom.
Right. But that's the thing, is to pick up on what they're doing, and you may have to redo your lessons to, like somebody was talking about in Guayaquil, the spaghetti structures. You change the context. It's not a bridge. It's like the gondola for that. That's a great example, because now they're like, oh, I know what you're talking about. I get it. It's important.
Yeah, I think a lot about motivation. And even when I think about my own life, what are the things that I'm willing to struggle with? Or they're things that matter to me. Like I really struggled to learn Spanish, and I spent years and years on that because it mattered to me. It was something that I wanted and needed in my life. I'm not going to struggle to learn German because I don't know why I should, at this moment in my life anyways. And so thinking about that, and even I think it was Tuesday, the NCTM webinar, Alex and I were watching it, that was about using STEM challenges for entrepreneurship with middle school students, and Jer Comfrey was one of the people leading, and she's been in this space with us before too. And they were sharing some of the examples of what students had been doing, and some of the comments that came through are always the comments that I hear from teachers as well, like, well, what about math that's like, what about my students? I don't know if my students would be ready for this kind of math. Like, that looks nice, that looks ideal, but my kids might not be there yet. And the response was, you'd be amazed at what kids will dive headfirst into and really struggle with and work through when they're really bought into it, when that motivation is there, when it becomes important to them. So I think about that with, like, it could be that the context is really meaningful, or they might be engaged through another aspect of the way that a lesson or task is set up that encourages the struggle, or it provides motivation for the struggle.
So Chad, that's what Miriam always wanted you to do.
Mm-hmm.
That's what Miriam wanted. She wanted us to connect with some of the ideas and the values of the Conservancy.
Right. And and we wanted to teach the teachers to do that.
Yes.
So in Waikil, what we've done is we're working in a pretty marginalized school with girls really who didn't understand that they had careers in mathematics available to them. And Callie's led this, and we're starting to think about doing this, I think, in Quito as well. But what we did is we thought it's a great way to train teachers if we pull them out of the classroom and have them help us in after school, because then they could try these kinds of engaging activities outside of the context of testing and principals watching, and we're seeing good things happen. But productive struggle wise, I have pictures of these girls just really trying to figure out how many pennies a boat can hold. But have you seen if it's context that they understand, that happens? And what about global context too, the global math stories that you're doing? If we did one, say in Papua New Guinea, would they be as engaged?
Yes, because it piques their interest. I mean, when they participate in a global math story, they're just fully engaged in it. And so when we're talking about something that's a part of it, I mean, the global math stories that we did with them all connected back to something locally as well. So they were able to see, like, when we did that with the Aerodovia in Guayaquil that's being developed, like, we did it with the global math story of the longest cable car in the world in Venezuela. And so, we looked at the history of chocolate and studied, I think it's Switzerland in that one, but it's one of the main products of Ecuador too, is cocoa. And so like I was specifically looking for global stories that also had a tie back into something, so that girls could see, like, this is something really cool that connects me to people in another place as well.
Which that global math story was a Valentine's Day gift from Jenny to me, just so you know.
Can I just add something about what Callie said about the interest? So actually, and this is something that has come up with Fatima as well, this is like probably like a sweeping statement, and I'm sure that not everyone will agree with it, but I do think, even like, I guess in the case of Guatemala, I would say that some of the topics that do have to do directly with the context have been taught so many times. Like, they've heard so many times about the Mayan ruins and like just things that become so repetitive that it's like hearing something about a different context that connects back to them, but like in a different way, in a different lens, is way more interesting and engaging, I think, than to hear the same thing that they already know. Like, I even noticed in the way that when Fatima is choosing the stories that are most interesting to her, it typically isn't something that is necessarily like super close to home. It's like something that is very different, very interesting, new, like that's what catches the attention. So I think what Callie's mentioning about that connection, like that's very important, but it's also like exciting to see something that is totally different than your context, right? So I think there's something there as well.
Yes, I think that's exactly right. It becomes, because it's the go-to that teachers are used to. So, and this is the time for that to happen, right? Because we're in a world where people are impacted by decisions made on the other side of the globe. And so understanding that it's not them and us, but it's people like me in those spaces. And I think the context provides that opportunity.
But they don't necessarily have to be grand contexts either, right? Like learning, understanding fractions for, doing carpentry or working around your house, or, not just baking, because that's what it's always used for. But,
Right.
but elementary math especially has applications to almost every part of one's life. And it should be pretty doable to connect it.
Yeah.
That's
So
interesting, because
Go ahead,
one
Jeff.
of the things we struggle with when we were writing about word problems is that sometimes word problems are so,
Right.
they're contrived so well to be so perfect that, you can recognize a quarter of a candy bar and everybody gets locked into candy or baking, like John said. But then sometimes, you look out at your classroom and say, okay, I'm going to send a quarter of them to do this and a quarter to do that. And you've got 17 kids in your room. There isn't a quarter of your kids. And so you have to do sort of a this and this, or I've got a ream of paper and I need to give about 10 sheets. So you give them a stack of paper. Sometimes the fractioning that we do, the partitioning, isn't precise, but we might still make a model and say, oh, about 3/4 of the students in the school. And if there are 500 kids, you're not going to get precisely 125, but you're going to get a little more than 100. And so I think that partitioning and that visualizing of a fractional piece that we do doesn't have to be precise to be important. Does that make sense?
Interesting. Yeah. So then that's like goes right in the face of the right answer in some way.
Totally. Yeah.
Huh.
I've been are you guys in Guatemala and Ecuador, are the kids going back to face-to-face classes, or are they going to be staying with virtual learning?
We still don't know.
Yeah, same here.
Me either.
Yeah.
actually, my board of education is deciding right now.
Wow.
Well,
yeah, still alive.
So it's hard to go off on a tangent with this, but I think the virtual learning gives us some opportunities to do exactly what you're talking about. And I'm working with the district and trying to help. They're still not sure what they're doing, but how do you move away from covering what's in the textbook and giving the kids worksheets virtually? And I've been radical enough to suggest we just all take a year off, but that's probably not going to be realistic. So, so I've been talking about, how about if the kids are staying home, instead of worrying so much about covering the curriculum, pick 3 or 4 important ideas in your grade level, and let's get some project-based learning stuff going on. And I'm struggling myself with, all right, how much of a basis does a 5th grader need to do a project where they're going to have to work with fractions? And they really haven't had the formal experience yet. And I think what Kim just said really might be the solution to my personal struggle with this is, let's not focus on an exact answer. Let's give kids an opportunity to think about, what does a 4th mean? And if it doesn't work exactly, that's okay, as long as we get kind of in the right neighborhood. And I just think this is such a wonderful opportunity for exactly what you guys are talking about, doing mathematics in a real world context. And I will tell you that other than the Galapagos, one of the most exciting places we visited on the first time I think we went to the Galapagos was the equator. When we went to that spot where the equator was and looked at, and I bought everything they had to sell because I thought, man, there's some really cool math lessons in this. And I haven't done them yet, but how can we help teachers come up with some projects that kids can do where they're really learning some of the fundamental understandings without having to know precisely, what do I do when I have to add 2 fractions that don't have a like denominator? And we're scared of that because, at least in this country, we worry about what's going to be on the test. And this might be a real opportunity to just kind of reprogram our own minds into how do kids learn mathematics and how do we let them explore and figure out what's going on and talk to each other about it and struggle a little bit with it. Maybe struggle a lot with it.
Yeah. So I think trust plays a role. As a student, I need to trust that my struggle is worthwhile. And for me, I think context provides that trust. Because if I've started most of my classes, or if my students know that most of the lessons have a real world connection, then the days that I have to just do pure math, they're engaged, especially if I make them student centered. I'll never forget kids just having the best time factoring polynomials, which didn't have a real connection, but they loved it because they knew that there would be a connection. I mean, we were just practicing, you need to get good at that and see the patterns, or finding, factors. There's some real world connections, but just to practice and get into the numbers, you have to trust that that's meaningful, though, I think. What do you guys think about that?
It reminds me of something I read last year. You know how, John, John, Zach Champagne went back into the classroom after being out of the classroom for a while, and he's teaching, I think, kindergarten. And he had beautiful, engaging, wonderful lessons. And then he wrote a blog post about a month in. He says, I was tired. I gave him a worksheet and they loved it. He says, I was feeling guilty, but they loved it.
They were probably tired too.
Well, exactly.
Well, that's hard work. That's different kind of thinking.
It is.
But what Chad just said also, I mean, there's a part of me that loves factoring numbers and playing with the math puzzle just for the sake of playing with the numbers and seeing what's going on. So, building that, what's the word I want? That love of just playing with numbers and figuring out what's going on. But that doesn't come from just, okay, today I'm going to show you how to add two fractions with unlike denominators, and here's a worksheet on how to do it. Mm-hmm. One of my favorite lessons, and I don't remember if I shared this with you guys, was from Glenda Lappin on, you have, whatever I would call the pizza parlor, they have this special deal. And I always wondered, is that really a special deal or not? And I built a whole math lesson before the kids had any idea of finding the area of a circle to figure out which was the better deal on pizza. And they came up with all these wonderful, I was going to say crazy, because they were a little bit crazy, but wonderful ways to figure out, how do I figure out, they were actually trying to figure out the cost per square inch. And their thinking was just absolutely amazing. And Glenda's point in doing that was to give them an appreciation for the formula, that I don't have to go through all of that. But once I have the formula, I can see how much easier it is, how much more efficient it is to use that formula. Wow. And I think sometimes we forget about that maybe some play with mathematics needs to come before we get into actually kind of the teaching of how does this work.
Mm-hmm. Something that comes to my mind when you said about this might be a solution for this pandemia thing, because we know that we are always running, and math is part of this too. When we're teaching, we are always running. And when we talk about struggling, needs time. So when we think now we have time because students are at home right now, and maybe it's time to slow down a little bit. Maybe it's time to slow down in order to just struggle a little bit and try to figure out what comes from here. So that's something that makes me think, we are always running, but students, the youngest ones, are really fast in everything. So they are not used to be patient. That's something really hard for them, because just waiting to see how is this solved, they want the solution right now. And that's also something cultural, because generations right now want things really fast. Have you seen that in messages? And they want just things like this. So this is something really hard we have to work with. And that's also cultural, because we all want things really fast, and children and even youngest one want that even faster.
Yeah, but how can I say, though, just directly to that, if you put a computer game that the kids have to figure out how to get out of this room in front of them, they're going to struggle with that thing for an hour until they figure that out. And then they're going to use that tool to figure out the next rule. So it is, again, still providing a context that encourages them to struggle.
Yeah, I was thinking that because I did last semester before quitting the university. Well, I was working at the university here. I did a statistics class with the escape game. So I tried that because I really want them to see how they were struggling with the whole of this problems, math problems, but also with something about and was really nice, and they loved it. And I asked, and I did an investigation, and everyone was so happy and engaged with the educational escape game. It was so fun, and it was because of that I knew that was something that they were loving to do. So it was all about their context.
I love how you said about slowing down.
Mm-hmm.
And I, there's always a part of me that worries about everything, and I worry about the teachers I work with always feel, and it's really unfortunate, but they always feel like they need permission to do something from the higher ups. And I know we've talked about the ministries of education in both Guatemala and Ecuador. Is there any possibility that, I know Achieve came out with this publication in the United States about what's really important at each grade level. So, maybe don't worry about this, that, or the other thing, or maybe work harder at connecting ideas. But is it possible to get the ministries or to have teachers feel comfortable with, you don't have to, quote, cover everything this year, but here are the big ideas, especially if we're doing online learning, mm-hmm. that we really want to focus on. And so maybe not everything will get covered, but kids will have that opportunity to really slow down and focus on the big, I hate the word big ideas, but I don't know how else to describe it. Key concepts, key whatever ideas at a particular grade level.
Major, yeah.
John, I'm also wondering what you think about that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I mean, focusing on the major works is a drum that I've been beating for a long time, and in our district and some others, right? I don't know that leaving fourth grade knowing what symmetry is matters nearly as much as knowing what equivalent fractions are.
Yes, absolutely.
And we spend, and what I find is that many of the teachers that I work with can fall into the trap of doing math that they like, not mm-hmm. recognizing that it's not as important as other topics.
Mm-hmm.
So how is that? Is that possible in Guatemala and Ecuador and maybe other countries that we work with?
Possible in Guatemala and Ecuador because yeah. Good.
Something, I'm sorry, Kelly. No, you go ahead.
Well, I was going to make kind of a connection. So when I first started working with the curriculum in Ecuador, I was very confused because it's not during this grade, these are the standards that you teach, but it's banded in like during these years of education, these are the things that you learn. And then there's kind of like, and these are the most important ones. And then these are the ones that are, if you get to them, that's great. Is that right, mm-hmm. Pal? Is that how you would describe that?
Yes.
And so, but teachers still have this sense of, I have so many things that I have to cover. And that comes from their textbooks, not directly from the curriculum. Mm-hmm. Because the curriculum creates a tremendous amount of space. But their textbooks, which is what they know, is to go page by page by page, which just runs through all of these things. Because I have spent a lot of time trying to figure out, what grade do you do this in? Is it 3rd, 4th, 5th, or 6th? And it's like all of them. But when you look at the textbooks, it's really different.
Well, yes. So we're getting low on time. And so I love that. I know in Guatemala it's a little bit more focused, but the textbook is there too, and teachers follow it. And so the question I have for John and then Kim and maybe Linda also is, what do you do with a traditional textbook? I mean,
throw it out the window.
I'm sure the minister.
Right there.
Yeah.
To me, it's the most deadening thing on my shelves. And every once in a while I pull them out and see, can I think about this differently now? Mm-hmm. Nope, it goes back on. I don't know. It closes doors rather than opening them.
Yeah, I struggle with that. I think it takes.
I mean, I have also, so I have not had a textbook in our school system since 1998. Just keep in mind though that they do serve a purpose in some cases because some teachers need that textbook to keep them afloat. So until we have more robust professional learning in all places to help everybody, get to a good place with their math instruction, it does serve some purposes. So there's that to keep in mind.
What John's not telling you is that people across the country go to his school division's webpage to get what to do in math. That's what he's not saying.
Yeah.
That's what I'm not saying. That's true.
Well, that would be a great resource if we can also get that in Spanish for us. But I think part of the challenge for our team is to help the teachers use the textbook as a guide and to slowly develop lessons, and really probably for us to keep them available until we have a group of people or your coaches to keep them, to say, hey, we got a way better fractions lesson. Let's use this instead.
Well, or using it as a starting point, right? But not letting it confine you and dictate how and what you teach. What I mean by that is, it's it is put together by knowledgeable people, and there are some rationales for the order of things that are put together. So that can be helpful. Following it, as someone said, page by page, that is certainly a problem.
So Chad, I would actually suggest the opposite. I would suggest starting with the standards and using the textbook to fill in to the standards. Because I went through the Ecuadorian standards when, I can't speak for Guatemala, but I can speak for Ecuador, that I felt them kind of, they were coherent. There was nothing that struck me as not productive. And so if you start there, if you start professional development there and say, what could we do with this? And then flip open the book a half an hour later after you've had some unit planning time. It's a thought, that the standards there at least are workable. I thought they were.
Yeah, I thought they were really forward thinking. I would love to use them ourselves.
That's my suggestion, is to start there rather than start with the book.
I'm so glad Callie gets to think about this, that I just go, okay, there you go, Callie.
Yeah, it's always the biggest blocker in working with teachers, though, is they hold so tightly onto their book because it's what they have, and they haven't received professional development. Oftentimes working with us is, some of the only professional development that they have received. And so the book is so integral, and even pointing out ways that the book is not perfect creates a lot of productive struggle. Hopefully it's productive in itself with the teachers and being able to think of another avenue.
So I have a question for you guys based on Powell's comments before. Our standards in the US are very heavy, especially at particular grade levels. 3rd grade, 5th grade, 6th grade in particular. I get so annoyed with K2 teachers because I actually think the standards in kindergarten through 2nd grade are pretty realistic. And they say, oh, we finished all this, we don't have anything left to do. And I'm going, how the heck did you do that? You absolutely have now the opportunity to slow down and do this better. I don't actually say that to them. But are your standards that dense? Or could they are, okay, because I'm thinking about Ken's comment, and I'm thinking about John's comment about symmetry. I learned symmetry at a grade somewhere in elementary school, and I don't think I ever thought about it again until I got to high school geometry. Are there, can we prioritize some of these? Can we back to this idea of prioritizing? What are some of the critical, and I'm going to say prerequisite knowledge kind of things? I don't really need to understand symmetry to do anything in the 5th or 6th grade, quite frankly. It's a nice topic, but if I don't cover that in the 4th grade, I'm not going to, the kids aren't going to fail 5th grade math. Whereas some of the other ideas are really quite fundamental to what happens in the next year. And I'm a little bit concerned because I don't think we're really off the topic of productive struggle, but how do we focus on the really key ideas, and how do we give teachers permission to say, okay, if you don't get to symmetry, don't worry about whether it's on the test or not. Just focus on the stuff that kids really need to have background with. I don't think I phrased that very well, but again, I'm going to go back to this notion that our teachers feel they need permission to skip anything. And this idea, I have this wonderful cartoon, I was going to try to put it up on the screen, but I can't find it, of somebody running on a treadmill while the dog is standing there with a leash in his mouth. And I've always, that's like how we teach math. We run on this treadmill and the kids are just standing there with this leash in their mouth. And I'm thinking, we're just covering curriculum and we're not doing what kids really need. So I think that that's a really important thing for all of us to think about. And yet I don't have the authority to say, no, you don't have to teach this, or this at this grade level. Again, I think what we're going through right now gives us kind of the permission, if not the necessity, to slow down and maybe learn something from all this.
That is what I've learned from Kim in the past few weeks, just reading some things she's written on Facebook, is that this is an opportunity for us to think differently about teaching. And rather to go, oh my God, this is horrible, let's embrace it and become way better at what we do. But I want to, because of time, I want to say this, I think, to our team. The reason we have these, thank you for John and Kim and Linda to be here every week, is so that we can share and have these conversations with the teachers there. You guys don't need to do this, to rewrite the curriculum, to create lessons. We need to help teachers there have an understanding of why it's important for them to do it. And then we maybe can help facilitate it happening. Otherwise, it's overwhelming, right? It's overwhelming, and it takes $1 billion grant from the Gates Foundation to do it.
Not technically.
Okay. John, you actually have done it. It takes time, maybe.
I've done the work a couple of times, actually, and it can be done. Actually, I will also tell you that when you engage teachers to help you with the work, you have teachers that are better positioned to teach math. Yes.
And John, I hope that meeting our team, they can contact you too, because I think when we're through this, for sure, and even before, you guys would be a good resource. And I think you all can learn working with us and vice versa. So let's keep the relationship going.
Yeah, hey, just keep the hard questions to somebody else.
Okay.
Low-hanging fruit all day long. Send them all you want.
And I had an ulterior motive in giving you John's name. I would love to see him come work with the teachers in Guatemala or in Ecuador, because I think he's just got his approach is always so common sense. And I worry so much about when we get way sky high over the teacher's head. That's what I love about these effective teaching practices. In some respect, they're difficult, but if you really think about them, they're common sense. So John, I just issued you an open invitation from Chad. He can kill me later, but I think he'll agree.
Hey, Linda's going to be our ultimate boss, maybe, anyway. So
maybe. Thanks. Thank you, Linda, for the kind words.
I got to tell you, some of the best experiences I have had in my teaching career is the one thing that I find with the teachers in Ecuador and Guatemala is they get so excited and they are so open to trying new things, and they're just, I get a lot of pushback. I won't say I get a lot of pushback. I get some pushback when I work with teachers here. But the teachers that I have worked with, maybe because they're the ones that want to come, in Guatemala and Ecuador, are just so open and excited about new ideas and just thinking about doing things differently. And you guys are so awesome in the work that you do with them. And I think when Chad started with these effective teaching practices as part of our discussion, you can weave that into so much of the work you're doing with them. I mean, it almost gives them permission from an educational standpoint to think differently about what they're doing and how kids learn. So I love this. I look forward to every one of these meetings.
I love it too. Yes, I know. I'm so proud of our team when I have people like John and Kim and come in and go, see, isn't this cool? But can I wrap up with this comment that one of my advisors, I had some really good advisors, I think, and one of the women said, I don't know that I think you should call yourself a teacher, because teaching implies you're doing too much. If you see, one of the other questions is, if you look at the table on figure 20, almost every word starts with student, not teacher.
Yeah.
Right.
So that says something to me. What do you think about that? And what would be a better word instead of teacher?
Oh, who are you asking?
Anybody? Well, first of all, let's ask our team, and then I want you guys
Okay.
to,
All right.
what do you guys think? What do you think about that statement? Especially, I'm really interested to hear from you, Paul and Fatima, because you grew up in the culture that's a little different. You're in the culture that we're working. What do you think? What about that idea? You're not a teacher. You're something else. What are you?
But actually, in Spanish is not teacher, is like a master. That's a word, maestro.
Oh.
So it means different from
That's right,
teaching,
maestro.
because teachers come from teaching. So makes a different thing, totally different sense in Spanish.
Oh.
But thinking in English, then,
Mhm.
well, maybe facilitating, helping building like a scaffolding, something like that will be easier or make more sense to that.
Yeah. What do you think, Fatima?
Ahorita voy, solo lo estoy analizando.
Yeah. What do you guys think?
She says she's thinking.
Yeah, she's just thinking.
Okay, you're thinking. Okay.
I'll just like, I mean, I think in what we talk about a lot when we're talking about that, it's like guía, like your guide or like your mentora, right? Like it's something that's more of like this person that's supporting you through the process and that's like guiding you, but it's not the person that's like at like the top of the pyramid, like telling you exactly how it's supposed to be. And I feel like that's like that word, like Fatima's even using it like in other programs on like things that we're developing right now. It's always kind of like, how do we change the vocabulary that's associated with this traditional role? Because we've seen that too, right? Like that association is really strong. And so you can present the same thing using a different word and people's reaction to it is like radically different. Like it's like when we, at the previous organization that I worked at, when we delivered the curriculum and all the PD, it was all the same stuff, just with different vocab. And it allowed people to sort of like separate that sort of like what they had been ingrained in them for years and years and actually unlearn that and then relearn it in a different way, which was much more open. So yeah, I think of guía, I think of mentora. No sé si Fátima como piensas en otra palabra diferente aparte de esas dos, si no fuera maestro o profe.
Como facilitador, guía.
Yeah, facilitator, like how said. Guide, yeah.
What do you guys think, Kim or John or yeah?
I'll just give this perspective. It comes from the language person's perspective. Is that like, for example, in Dutch, the word is the same for teaching and learning. It's just whether you're the receiver or you are the doer. So leren means teach and it means learn.
Interesting.
So seeing the same thing as two sides of the same coin, not two different ideas.
One of the words I got from Ruth Parker when she was talking about number talks was conductor. Conductor of an orchestra, where everybody kind of has their part and they're, are bringing it all together, but I'm not telling each one what to do or how to do it.
I like it.
So we come together and make this beautiful music. And I'm always reluctant to use the word teach the kids because it just all of a sudden makes me the expert and I have to show them how to do it. And so I love this part of the conversation.
The word guide, I think, is such a good word.
Guide. It's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. I thought of sensei if you're a martial artist.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah. Good. Well, John, anything like, any questions? And you guys, have any questions from like Callie, Naomi, Fatima, Alex, Paul? We have like 3 minutes left.
I have a question for John. You going to write that book in Spanish?
No, I could ask Aaron about having it translated though.
Yeah, there may be something to that. We can see what happens. Yeah, because it'd be great to have it in Spanish. So, John, do you have any thoughts? Or okay, go ahead, Linda.
Was it me?
Tell you guys that Chad has arranged for some real, if you haven't figured it out yet, experts on each one of these sessions that we're having. And John is just one of my idols. He just has this way of bringing it together and making people smile and laugh and just feel really comfortable. So when he invites you to write him and ask him questions, do it. Do
Yeah,
it.
that's true. That's true. I do. Thank you, Linda, again for the kind words. One of the cool things about what I get to do and what you all get to do is to help help colleagues evolve as math teachers, right? So just like you would welcome any notes, I welcome them as well. Now be prepared, I might ask you a question back. So that's always something I do. But I will say, for closing remarks on my end, just what an impressive group you all are. And that you're leaving math in a better place than you found, that's for sure.
Thanks. Kim is going to be in John's seat in about a month, in 4 weeks, when we do elicit and use evidence of student thinking. So even as you read that, feel free to ask her questions. And John, you're welcome to join us in any of these conversations. We're going to keep this up. I think it's really good for us, and I hope you guys are learning.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for your time. Honestly, it's like we get to learn so much from everyone that's been part of the conversations. I feel like it's one of the very unique spaces that Teacher T provides, which is like incredible to be able to talk about this stuff with literally people who like write these things, that research these things. Because when we're in the field, I think it's just like any teacher, right? You're in the field and it's like going back to that space where you can actually think about it and reflect on it. Sometimes doesn't happen enough. So if nothing else, COVID has provided us more.
Right.
I was wondering if any one of you do speak Spanish, so want to be part of any of our learning labs in Spanish.
Wish I did. I so wish I did.
Yeah.
Un poquito.
Because you're also welcome in our Spanish.
I would love that. I'm not sure how much I would understand online because you don't get all of the sounds, but I would try.
You should.
Vas a estar como yo. En laboratorio de español vas a estar como yo.
John, when I was immersed for weeks in the Galapagos or in Ecuador or in Guatemala City, and my favorite place of all, El Paradigm, I left feeling like I spoke Spanish. I was convinced I understood Spanish. I think it was just from being immersed. But Chad always laughs at me. I kind of came home and said, what are they talking about? I didn't have a clue, but I kind of felt like, and the teachers were very patient with me.
Yes, they are. That is true.
Well, thank you all. Just
you.
to make sure, John, I'm recording this, and we do put it on YouTube. But if you're okay with that, that'd be great.
Sure. I don't think I said anything really bad, did I?
I think not.
You should review it, John.
Yeah.
Well,
there might have to be a couple beeps in there, but other than that, we're good.
That's good. Yes, I think we actually are now to the point where we sort of will be making it official. We're sending you something in the next couple of months or so. We're still working through that, but that'd be great. And so because frankly, I learned things that I like to go back and visit. Also, before we log off with you guys on our team, they gave us a couple of really good links in the chat. So you may want to click on that and just to have them on your browser.
Yeah, the one link that I put in there was our district curriculum. Once you get into a grade level, you can kind of explore. It'll take a couple clicks to get to where you're going, but once you get to a standard, you will find countless resources, games, lessons, etc., to use with students.
Excellent. I'm so glad we have that stuff. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, folks.
Take care.
Thank you.
Yeah, without a doubt. It's really nice to meet everybody.
Stay healthy.
Yes.
Yes.
Healthy.
Thank you.
Cheers. See y'all.
Cheers.
Bye.